A leading voice in the scientific community has sounded the alarm about gene editing. It's time for his Washington bosses to listen and act. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet. This is BreakPoint. As I said in a BreakPoint commentary last month, gene editing technologies such as CRISPR and what's being called prime editing are existential threats. We have no idea what our attempts to play God with the human genome will unleash on humanity. Yet, we insist on charging ahead, despite our imperfect knowledge, with an unbounded confidence in our abilities. Coming from a concerned non-scientist like me, concerns like that can be dismissed as alarmist. But what if the concern comes from the director of the National Institute of Health? Turns out that Francis Collins is also concerned. In a recent article in Discover magazine entitled "We Must Never Allow Our Technology to Eclipse Our Humanity," Collins called for a moratorium of at least 5 years on heritable human gene editing. Heritable gene editing technologies, like prime editing, aim to edit genes that can be passed on to future generations, along with any unintended and dangerous mutations. That differs from non-heritable gene editing, which can be used to treat people with life-threatening disorders, such as sickle cell disease, HIV infections, cancer, muscular dystrophy. Now, proponents of prime editing talk about the possibility of making, quote, any kind of DNA change that anyone wants at just about any site in the human genome. Thus, according to Francis Collins, scientists and leaders around the globe have an obligation to consider the appropriate use, if any, of heritable human gene editing. This involves scrutinizing the safety of such experiments, including the risk of unintended mutations, as well as a clear-eyed analysis of actual medical need. Anticipating some objections, the NIH director then added that the current arguments that the benefits outweigh the risks are surprisingly uncompelling. And finally, Collins insists that we must weigh the profound social, ethical, and moral issues associated with modifying the germline in ways that could change the human species forever. Now, it's good to hear someone as prominent as the director of the National Institutes of Health voice many of the same concerns that we have at BreakPoint. But as Wesley J. Smith has pointed out at National Review, it's still probably not enough. Smith notes that when it comes to the rapid development of the most powerful technologies ever invented, CRISPR, germline gene editing, artificial life, three-parent embryos, cloning, well, the Trump administration has been, and I'm quoting Smith here, derelict. For the most part, while NIH Director Collins' statement should be applauded, it's an exception. As Smith states, unless leaders higher up the food chain engage the question in more amplified media venues than Discover, Collins' proposed moratorium will never happen. In some ways, as I recently pointed out, the Communist Party of China, by sentencing Dr. He to 3 years imprisonment for experimenting on fetuses using CRISPR, has demonstrated more commitment to reining in scientific hubris than our own government. Of course, given their track record, it'd be silly to think that Beijing cares at all about human dignity or the sanctity of human life. Their reaction was almost certainly because Dr. He's transgressions portrayed that country in an especially bad light. In our country, scientists differ from Dr. He in only one respect. They're a lot more subtle about what they're doing than Dr. He was. Simply put, we need much more evidence that those higher up the food chain in this administration care about the issue and are willing to make it a priority. For that to happen, we have to let them know it's a priority for us. Gene editing, what Smith has called biotech anarchy, is among the greatest threats to the sanctity and dignity of human life that we currently face. I'll say it again. It's an existential threat. It's time for Christians, and through them our leaders, to treat it like one. For BreakPoint, I'm John Stonestreet.